Hello and welcome back to Blooming in Brisbane. Today we're going to be talking about making compost. Everyone loves compost and it's what makes a really healthy garden. This is the end result. We all want healthy soil for our backyards to grow fantastic gardens. But what is compost? Compost is made up of a whole range of a few simple materials that we can all do in our backyard. The most important ingredient in compost is nitrogen. Now, nitrogen comes in a whole range of different forms, but the easiest way to get nitrogen into our compost is by using garden cuttings and clippings. So the green leaves from our old vegetables, our old plants, they can all be broken down and used into our composting method. Nitrogen is the most important part of any compost. It also comes in the form of fallen leaves or dried leaf material. So here we have some bamboo leaves that have fallen onto the ground. This is a fantastic use in compost as it will break down very, very quickly. The other essential ingredient in composting is actually carbon. So carbon comes with a lot of eucalyptus leaves. Carbon comes in the form of dried twigs and leaves, and even newspaper can be used. So scrunched up or shredded up newspaper is a really great way of adding extra carbon and a wonderful way, of course, of recycling those old unwanted newspapers that we all have in our homes. So adding those together, you will start to create a composting action. But how do you do this? One of the best ways, or really the only way to do it, is by putting the layer upon layer effect. First of all, you can start by putting a layer of the green foliage, which is where your nitrogen is all hidden. Then you can go for the carbon, which could be your dried smaller twigs and leaves and such like that. Put them on together, layer upon layer. Now you can also add a little bit of manure in there if you wanted to, so things like cow manure or chicken manure. Chicken manure is actually very high in nitrogen in itself and will help to break down all the other organic material. I like to add a little bit of calcium into my compost. I find that adding calcium helps to sweeten the compost as it starts to form, and that comes in the form of either dolomite or lime. So every time you add a layer, add a sprinkling of dolomite in there. It's a really great way of helping to alleviate any bad odours that might actually come from the compost. Generally speaking, good healthy compost should never smell. One of the easiest methods, for instance, of actually getting nitrogen into your compost is by recycling those grass clippings. There's a huge amount of nitrogen available in the lawn itself, and that is where we should be reusing it. Lawn piled up on itself can often thatch, and many people tend to use that a lot as a mulch, but it tends to thatch a lot and stop water from penetrating onto the soil. Here's a little tip. When using compost or making compost, always have on hand the likes of Comfrey. There are certain herbs that will actually accelerate the composting process, and Comfrey is one of the very, very best that you can actually choose. Also yarrow. This is a herb that has a lovely deep taproot that takes all the minerals up from down in the soil, brings it up into the leaves, and then of course as it breaks down helps to accelerate the composting process in your garden. Now, compost isn't just made by layering of the dry materials. You must add water. Water is an essential ingredient in having to have this organic material breaking down. Another one, which is all around us, is oxygen. So by turning over your compost on a regular basis, you will actually be aerating your soil, aerating all the organic matter and helping to make sure that those pieces will all break down. So when you go to look into your compost, you will find that there'll be lots of living creatures in there. So there'll be little flies, there could sometimes be what we see as maggots, should be lots of good worms in there as well. Now that tends to happen a lot, for instance, on a cold compost heap. Generally speaking, if we want a hot compost, that decomposing process happens very, very quickly, and the nitrogen levels are quite high. The temperature of your compost heap should be around 60 odd degrees, and that's quite high. So when you open it up, for instance, there should be quite a high temperature. Not a lot of things live in there for a long period of time, but you'll see a lot more living material in a cold compost. One thing to remember is not to add things such as dog feces or cat feces into your compost, and also no meat scraps, because meat scraps tends to attract the like of vermin like rats or mice into your compost heap, and that just fouls the whole composting process. So try and keep it as organic as possible, and you'll find that everything will work wonderfully well, and you too can end up with a wonderful rich resource such as this to help your gardens and plants grow beautifully. This week's plant of the week is the Alstroemeria. I love Alstroemerias because they just flower and flower for such a long time. They come from South America and are a tuberous plant that will die down during the heat of the summertime, come up again and flower each year with very little care. These new dwarf strains are absolutely fantastic and so easy to care for in a garden, no matter what size your garden. As you can see, they are wonderful for growing in pots, and their flowers make fantastic cut flowers. So if you're looking for something that's bright and colourful and cheery, or just to give to someone who wants something really nice for their garden, choose an Alstroemeria. It is something worthwhile, long term, and absolutely easy to grow for anyone.
We know gardening. We know herbs. We know colour. After all, at Plants Plus, we know all you need to know about your garden.